Okay, I'm ready to go. We still have a minute and we are missing 2 commissioners, but otherwise we're ready to go.
Okay, we'll come to order now. Welcome to the December 1st, 2020 meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Zachary, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine?
Here.
Commissioner Griggs?
Here.
Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Kopcho? I have not admitted Commissioner Kopcho yet, so we'll come back. Commissioner Levin?
Here.
Commissioner McKinley?
Here.
Commissioner Pollock?
Here.
Commissioner Schweikart?
Here.
Commissioner Slater?
Here.
And Commissioner Kopcho?
Present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Zachary. We'll move to the consent calendar. Commissioner Levin, do you have a motion?
I do. I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the October 20th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting and enter them in the record.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
And who is that?
Kopcho.
Thank you, Commissioner Kopcho. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor will signify aye once Zachary calls your name, please.
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin? Commissioner Levin?
Sorry, aye.
Commissioner McKinley?
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Perfect. Sounds like it passed. We'll move on to public hearings. I'll now open a hearing on item 5.1, which is case number DRSPR 80J20-03. Are there any ex parte disclosures to make or conflicts of interest? And I'm looking at my participant. If you do, please raise your hand in the participant screen. I don't see anybody on this case. Giving you just a second. Okay, I think we're ready to move on to statement of criteria, please, Zachary.
Yes, this is a public hearing to consider Class 3 design review, Class 3 site plan review, and Class 2 adjustment case number DRSPR ADJ 20-03 for property located at 220 Kingwood Avenue Northwest. The criteria applicable to this application are found in Salem Revised Code, chapters 225.005 E2, Class 3 design review, 220.005 F3, Class 3 site plan review, 250.005 D2, Class 2 adjustment. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statement or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you. Aaron, are you ready?
I am, yeah, thank you. And good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Can you see my screen here?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So my name's Aaron Penko with the Planning Division. At this time, I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments, and this PowerPoint presentation. This is a vicinity map of the property. The property consists of 3 separate lots with a combined size of approximately 0.58 acres. Kingwood Avenue to the west of the property and 2nd Street to the south are both classified as local streets. This is a zoning map for the property. The property is zoned ESMU. It's the Edgewater 2nd Street mixed use zone. The property to the north is zoned RS, single family residential, and it's with the compact development overlay zone and within the Walker School residential overlay zone. And this is an aerial photo taken a while back of the property. There's 2 existing buildings on the west side of the property and an existing parking lot. There was a home in the center here that was removed a while back. In its place is a temporary dental clinic that serves Northwest Human Services. And the home here on the east side, it still stands. So this is our property here. The proposal tonight is for a parking lot that's going to serve the Northwest Human Services main campus, which is located on the south side of 2nd Street, directly south of this property. And this is a photo taken of that temporary dental clinic right in the center of our property. This is another photo taken looking north. This is 2nd Street here. So you can see the dental clinic, a few of the existing buildings there, and that existing home. And then this is a photo taken looking south towards the main campus for Northwest Human Services. So design review, according to the design guidelines or design review standards, is required for all development within the ESMU zone. The proposed development is for an off-street parking area with no new buildings. The design standards of the ESMU zone anticipate development of new buildings and include design standards for building orientation, ground floor windows, and weather protection along building frontages. Without a building, the proposal is not in compliance with several of the design standards, which is why this case is before the Planning Commission. However, the parking area is in compliance with the standards relating to the design and location of off-street parking areas. The proposed use for the property is classified as a commercial parking lot, which is listed as a permitted use in the ESMU zone. With the exception of 3 areas where the applicant is seeking an adjustment, the site plan as proposed and with the recommended conditions is found to be in conformance with the development standards of the ESMU zone. The applicant has identified 4 project enhancements, which include pedestrian connections constructed with pavers and or scored cement, providing pedestrian scale lighting not more than 16 feet in height, installation of landscaping and irrigation using a plan designed by an Oregon landscape architect, and using native plant materials to meet minimum landscape requirements. The applicant has requested 3 adjustments for this project. The first adjustment is to the building frontage requirement. In the ESMU zone, there's a requirement that a minimum of 50% of the frontage along 2nd Street be occupied by a building that's placed on the minimum setback line. And with no new buildings proposed, the project does not comply with this standard. The second adjustment request is to eliminate the required 5-foot setback for a vehicle use area adjacent to interior property lines. So you can see on the site plan, the black dashed lines represent the property lines. The areas that are highlighted in green are where the setback would be required. And these lots are all under common ownership and will be accommodating a single development. The applicant is seeking an adjustment in order to provide a functionally integrated parking lot that's designed to better serve the proposed use. And finally, the applicant is seeking an adjustment to the pedestrian access standards of the ESMU zone. The standard would require that a dedicated 5-foot walkway from the eastern edge of the property or the proposed parking lot to the entrance of the existing buildings on the west end of the site be provided to provide access between those spaces and those existing buildings there. The purpose of the pedestrian access standards is to provide that safe walking route for pedestrians through the parking area. However, in this case, the people that are parking in this lot will for the most part be traveling to the main Northwest Human Services campus on the south side of 2nd Street and not accessing the maintenance building or the office building at the southwest corner of the site. So instead of providing the pedestrian pathways that provides that east-west connectivity, The applicant is instead providing two pathways to the south, and those are highlighted here, where the majority of the pedestrians will be traveling, equal or better meeting the intent of the pedestrian access requirements. Public notice was provided for this case, and we did receive comments back from the West Salem Neighborhood Association in support of the proposal. No other public comments were received. I believe we have some folks that have signed up to testify tonight. And staff is recommending that the Planning Commission approve the request subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Thank you.
Any questions of Aaron? I didn't have my mute off. If you could raise your hand in the participant screen, that would be helpful. I'm not seeing any questions. At this, Commissioner Pollack.
It wasn't a question, but I just wanted to thank very much on page 4 of the staff report. It does talk about the HOA, that there was no homeowners association, and about the West Salem neighborhood meetings and things. So since I'm always giving staff a hard time, I just wanted to say thank you very much for adding that information.
Thanks, Commissioner Pollack. Commissioner Slater, followed by Commissioner Heller. Commissioner Slater, you're on mute.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Aaron, can you walk me through where on the drawing the trees are located?
I don't believe we have a landscape plan for the project here. So at the time of building permit application, the applicant will be required to provide that landscape plan that will show where the trees will be going for the site. So the ESMU zone has that minimum 15% landscape requirement, and at least 40% of the plant units there are required to be trees.
So what, and maybe this is broader than specifically this application, but what's the general standard for tree coverage for surface parking lots?
There's not a general standard for tree cover for commercial parking lots. It's subject to a few landscape requirements. It's subject to the 15% standard for the ESMU zone, and then parking lots, depending on their size, have a minimum percentage of the interior that needs to be landscaped. And the plant units required for the landscaping are a combination of shrubs and trees. So typically a 40% minimum would have to be trees on that interior parking lot landscaping.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Heller, followed by Commissioner Swikart.
Thank you, Chairman Griggs. My question was about the attachment D from the West Salem Neighborhood Association. And was there an agreement for the native plants? I mean, can you walk me through what you've agreed to that the neighborhood association wanted, and apparently you've reached an agreement, or no?
So part of this application, and for any development in the ESMU zone, they're required to provide a certain number of project enhancements. So there's a list of different standards that an applicant can choose from. One of those standards is the use of native plant materials in their landscape design. So this is something that the applicant chose to do with their application. We did also receive the comment from West Salem Neighborhood Association in support of the use of native plant materials, which was something that the applicant was providing.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Commissioner Heller. Commissioner Swikart.
Thank you. Commissioner Heller's question was one of the two I had. The other one was just making sure that we're clear on the background for kind of the wider picture here. So I know that I think 3 at least of the commissioners that are on the commission now were not on the commission when we approved the previous work that was an application that came before us in October of 2019. And so I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that the creation of or completion of the commercial parking, off-street parking, was a condition of approval to that previous approval, right? So we're talking about an extension of a previously conditioned component of a previous application. Just to clarify, no question, just clarifying.
Thank you. And Aaron, did you have anything you wanted to say to Commissioner Schweikart?
She's right. That's
Yes.
the situation. Yes. So the main campus here did go through a land use review last year for an expansion and redevelopment of their main campus. The campus itself does not meet the minimum parking requirement by itself on that lot. So they are needing some additional spaces in order to comply with that and in order to get occupancy for their buildings.
Thank you. Commissioner Pollock, followed by Commissioner Slater.
On the applicant's document that they submitted, which is attachment C on page 4, I believe it's page 4. Yeah. Anyway, it talks about, and the neighborhood association letter doesn't address this, but when it talks about wheel stops and extending curbs, and basically it says, it's like in the mid part of the page, a concern we heard from neighbors presentation with Salem neighborhood was the high amount of off-street parking around the neighborhood. The proposed parking area will be designated to maximize the number of off-street parking spaces for employees. I just wanted to mention that even when I was land use chair, that was the biggest problem the neighbors had with Northwest Human Services. So not only like really supporting what Commissioner Swarkert had said that not only was a condition to get the off, but this adjustment, it looks to me, and this is my question to you, Aaron, it looks to me that because of the setbacks not being in the parking lot, that looks like 15 more spaces could be created. Is that correct? That's what I'm counting, where have those green little things. I'm counting that it looks like about 15 more spaces are going to be able to be there because those are no longer going to be, if this is approved, 15 more spaces will be created.
That's correct. Yes. The setbacks here would eliminate some of the spaces here. It would make it more difficult for them to provide parking spaces given the limited area there.
Yeah. Oh, great. So I just want to make it clear that number one, because West Salem later didn't address it, that was the biggest concern in the neighborhood. And 2, the adjustment will give us 15, what I think is 15 more spaces. So I just want to make sure that's kind of addressed there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollock. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. Just so I understand, I appreciate the background information. This parking lot is essentially a requirement of a previous land use decision. Is that what I understand?
That's correct.
So we got rid of a house to put in surface parking lot so that people don't park on a public street. Is that what I understand? There was concern that clients of the dental facility would be parking on a public street, and that was a problem to the neighborhood. So we built a surface parking lot. I'm just trying to understand the background.
So yeah, part of the background for the main campus expansion is that they're required to meet a minimum number of spaces, and they didn't have that on their site to the south of 2nd Street. So in order to meet that requirement, they are going to be building this parking lot here on the north side of 2nd Street. That's going to help meet the minimum requirement for the facility to the south.
Okay, but in other parts of our work on the Planning Commission, we've been trying to remove minimum parking requirements. Is that the case? I mean, when it comes to housing, we're removing minimum parking requirements so we can maximize housing. Is that the
Lisa,
case?
Commissioner, maybe I'll jump in, Commissioner Slater, if that's okay. Yes, we did recently remove minimum parking for multifamily in certain areas of town, but outside of downtown, we do have minimum parking for every use across town except multifamily and limited locations. So when the previous development came in, you know, we calculated their minimum required parking, and they have lots of different ways to satisfy that. And this is the route that they chose because they already own this property. We're already using it for something. It allows a parking lot there. So this is a path that's available. So I wouldn't say it's accurate to say that we made them, you know, buy a house and tear it down for a service parking lot. That's their path that they chose. They do have to meet the minimum requirement, or they have to ask for, you know, a variance or adjustment to that, or they have to lease parking, you know, or need it in some way that the code allows. And they haven't chose to do that. They've chose to build this parking lot, which is a permitted use in this zone.
Okay.
Did you
thank
follow
you.
up later?
No, not at this point.
Okay, Commissioner Schweikart.
Yeah, just to kind of build some of the background. So, Aaron, do you have the public comment that we received when the previous application came in October of 2019? Because I believe that there was public comment provided by nearby neighbors with regards to some of their concerns. And I want to say that parking was a commented on component. So I don't know if you have that available or not.
I don't have that right here,
Okay.
but I might be able to dig around and find it here and come back to you on that.
Okay.
In the meantime, Commissioner Pollock.
Erin, could you go back to the picture where it's the aerial?
Yeah.
Okay, so to give a little background, especially from you know, from when I was the neighborhood chair, you see the two houses, like there's a corner, the very corner that used to be DeVito's Insurance, and then later the Northwest built that garage, and then those two houses. I will tell you about those two houses. They've actually fixed them up. They were, when they purchased those, they were almost a tear down. The one where the cars are near, that had a lady that was a hoarder there, that after they bought it, it took a lot for them to get the junk out of there. And then the other one had a tree that was basically nature had taken over, and the tree was basically causing problems for everybody. But both those houses, they actually rehabbed them in order for them to use them as offices. And so now I see that one house they took down and put a temporary there. But the thing is they've owned those two homes for a long, long time. And they have been, the whole idea is that you're using them temporarily as temporary offices. But the big concern and the big complaint from everybody around there was the parking. So instead of having those now for their offices and things, and then all it looks, it's to take the parking off the street. Because I can tell you, when I did the walking on the street, every house I went to, that was the biggest complaint, was to take that parking off of the street. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to give the background to some of our newer commissioners.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollock. Anybody else having a question? I think your comments support what Commissioner Schweikart was also pointing out. And I think probably next time we have a case that like this, that's, you know, sort of a follow on to a previous decision, you know, we can get a link to the earlier hearing so newer commissioners can listen to it. I think might help. Any other comments, questions of staff at this time? We'll have another opportunity. Seeing none, we'll move on to the applicant. Would the applicant like to speak to the commission? And you have 15 minutes if you need it. Name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Sam Thomas with Lenity Architecture, 3150 Kettle Court, Salem, Oregon. Representing Northwest Human Services in the application as far as design services and planning and land use. I think, we agree with staff's recommendation for approval. I've been following the comments and questions. I think they've all been more or less answered, but we're happy to answer any questions you have. I don't have a
Okay,
presentation for this evening, but happy to answer any questions.
thank you, Sam. Any questions of the applicant? I'm not seeing any hands raised at the moment. Let me give you a minute to catch up. Our questions must have been asked and answered of staff. So oh, I see Commissioner Pollock, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I just want to reiterate I just want you to address about when you met with West Salem Neighborhood Association. Can you just address what they talked about off-street parking? You said
Yes.
what their parking concerns were?
Yes, and I kind of think the aerial photo actually kind of illustrates a little bit of that. You can see, there is street parking allowed, kind of at an angle on just north of the main campus, and street parking, on the northern side of 2nd Street as well, and around the blocks around the campus. So yeah, that was, obviously we want to try to meet the parking requirement based on the use and the size of the building. So how it kind of worked out was, we found that there was the need for additional space that couldn't be provided directly on that main campus. So this is a multi-phase development. The temporary dental modular was it was a building that was on the main campus, and as part of a phased approach to be able to still provide services to clients that Northwest Human Services does, and then also be able to build a new campus and the new buildings and required parking as part of that overall phase development. So this is sort of the final phase to provide the required number of parking spaces, getting as close as we can. And obviously we've asked for a few adjustments to kind of maximize parking, but we would be meeting the parking requirement with the current proposal. So that's why there's the number of parking spaces and the need for the sort of northern separated parking area.
Thank you, Sam. Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Pollock?
No, I didn't. Thank you very much.
You're
Thank
welcome. Commissioner Kopcho, you have a question?
I do. Hi, Sam. Thanks for joining us this evening. I hope you had a good holiday. That goes for everybody. Sam, I just have a quick question. It's somewhat unrelated to the proposal at hand, but more kind of forward thinking. Since the city is currently undergoing a revisioning process, climate task force process, and a number of other things that are just happening at the planning level. Anytime I look at a proposal like this for a new parking lot, even outside of the area where there's minimum parking requirements, I think of, obviously a parking lot is something that sticks around for a while. And as the city moves toward a more, let's say like a reduced carbon footprint, I think how, we might promote more EVs. And so I think through the work of our developers and you guys at Lenity, certainly projects like this with Mr. Logan, to considerations for not necessarily installing EV charging spaces, but just having the foresight to designate a couple spaces and to run the conduit required, the permitting to do so in a couple, per space is probably like 900, I think, last time I checked, versus retrofitting it in the future if we had to. And then it's, 3,000-4,000 a space. So I wonder if certainly, it's not something, it may be a little out of the ordinary for a typical conversation, but it's 2020. So I think we're all used to out of the ordinary by now. But I wonder if having that as an additional consideration or condition would be something that would be amenable just as we kind of move forward.
Lisa, do you want to step in on that one? Lisa Anderson Ogilvy. Yeah, she's there.
I waited. I was like, maybe she's talking about somebody else.
No,
The other Lisa.
you, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, we can't require it right now. It's not in our code. It's not a requirement.
Right.
But yes, if the applicant wants to do it, I would also encourage them to do that and think towards the future. And I think, it might be something we're moving towards requiring in the near future. So.
I would say we have Paul Logan. I don't know if he's available to speak on that. I wouldn't want to speak on his behalf as committing to that at this point without consulting him first in the design team, just because there's other considerations. We'd probably have to potentially redesign some things, but I would defer to Mr. Logan to speak to that if he wanted to tonight.
Hi, this is Paul Logan, Northwest Human Services, 681 Center Street Northeast, Salem 97301. We have looked at a number of sort of green ideas for now and in the future. Our project, I can take it back and certainly talk with people about a project. We're sort of running because of lateness of the project is sort of on schedule, but sort of not, and it's sort of been budgetarily crazy between having the fires and having the COVID and having these things. So I wouldn't promise that we would do it at this point, but I could certainly take it back and talk with the team about it.
Sure, I appreciate that, Mr. Logan. It's one of those things that I just look at anytime we have people on the ground digging stuff up, and we have construction management costs already underway.
Right.
The cost savings for folks that are doing the work is there to realize. So I understand all the different considerations. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Kopcho. Any other questions of the applicant? Going once. Seeing no hands. Thank you. And Zachary, correct me, we don't have anybody signed up, do we, to testify?
Oh, actually we do. We have one person from the neighborhood association, that's Stephen Anderson, and
Okay.
we have one member of the public.
Okay, I didn't get those names ahead of time, sorry.
Oh, sorry about that. The member of the public is Cheryl Witters. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name.
So we'll have Steve Anderson, since he's here representing the neighborhood association. Mr. Anderson, if you could speak to the group and state your name and address for the record. And as you know, you have 10 minutes.
Good evening. Steve Anderson, 3240 Gelder Road, Northwest, current land use chair of West Salem Neighborhood Association and a past chair sharing history with Commissioner Pollock. So we know some things of the past, but first you have a copy of my written testimony. But tonight I just want to thank Aaron for his cooperation and support on this. He was very helpful in navigating some of the issues. And since the EMSU is very important to the community, and also to Rod Johnson, a project manager with Northwest Human Services. I met with Rod and we walked the site because of the request for some variances and standard changes. We looked at the architectural drawings, we walked through and looked at some of the changes and basically found out that basically what is being proposed can fit into the EMSU zone for Edgewater 2nd Street, the mixed use. Particularly looking at these proposed alternatives to see if they meet the intent of that zone. The Neighborhood Association worked closely with Lisa and other members of the planning staff 2+ years ago to develop this zone so that 2nd Street would redevelop in a positive way, setbacks to have a user-friendly walk on 2nd Street, having parking structures to be shielded from the public and to blend into the neighborhood, particularly as you go into the different parts of the neighborhood. As you've mentioned, off-street parking has been an issue in the past, and we believe that this project addresses that. There is some closing of some entries to this campus on Edgewater, which will cut down on congestion on Edgewater Street, which will facilitate more use of bus traffic and other issues. But basically, as we looked at this pedestrian standard within the EMSU zone is very particular and important to the neighborhood. walkability, connectivity, alternate transportation forms, and livability and redevelopment of this area. This is a large campus and traffic has been an issue in the past. But as we've looked at that, as I've talked to Rod, as I've looked at some of the issues, we thought that native plants would be an important addition. There are several drainages in this area that currently have sedges and enhancements that reduce the pollutants going into the stormwater. We thought that that would be a good idea. We appreciate that the applicant added that as one of their inclusions at our request. And so basically, as we looked at the intent, the needs of the zone and the variances that were being asked and the restrictions to be reduced, we saw some compatibility with what we wanted to see in this neighborhood, what we worked for over the last 2 years in the zoning requirements. And so the neighborhood association supports this project as proposed and conditioned. We would also second any opportunity to add the e-view stations for parking. And so that was my testimony. So thank you to the commission, to Rod and Aaron for their support. This is one of those projects where we were able to get good cooperation between the applicant, staff, and the neighborhood to come up with what that we see meets the needs of the community. So I'll take any questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any questions of Mr. Anderson? And I'm not seeing any questions at this time. Thank you, Steve, for testifying.
So I'll mute and wait for.
That sounds great. Okay, next is Cheryl Witters. If you could state your name and address, Cheryl, for the record, that would be great. And you have 5 minutes, please.
Before I begin, I need to share my screen, if that's possible. Oh, it looks like it is letting me do that. Okay, just one moment while I get that set up. Thank you for your patience.
You bet. I won't even start your 5 minutes yet. I'll hang on.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
No worries.
Okay, can everybody see the map?
Yes.
Just want to make sure that that's visible. And I'm curious, can you see my mouse? Hover?
Yes, but we need your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, I'm not ready to go. I just want to get set up. Okay. All right. Yes. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to come before you to provide some public testimony. My name is Cheryl Witters. My address is 250 Kingwood Avenue Northwest. I am the property that's carved out of this lot, adjacent to Northwest Human Services on 2 sides. I have been before you in the past as this project has progressed, and Northwest Human Services has chomped away at their acquisition. But to refresh your memory, and for those of you new to the commission, I've been there for 20 years and bring a perspective not only as a resident of the Edgewater district, but also a perspective from some document from your own website. To give you a sobering view of my back window as this project has gone on. Here's a time lapse for you of the house that they're talking about that was demolished. And I hate to say it, but Mrs. Pollock indulges and embellishes her comments and misrepresents the community. And I'm quite offended that she talks about my previous neighbor the way that she does. That was a very kind neighbor. And I picked blackberries from the bushes in the back of her house and made pie. The house in the background of this video that you see, this house that was demolished was maybe the 11th affordable house that was removed from the Edgewater district and replaced with the parking lot, or will be. The one behind it is next up in this project, a historical asset to the neighborhood. And the couple that was there actually was fulfilling the desire of this neighborhood from previously vetted planning sessions. And they had a little company called Pitchfork and Crow, and they lived there. It was a live-work situation. And during economic downturns, they found themselves to be, well, strapped over a barrel, so to speak, in foreclosure and had to leave. And Northwest Human Services took advantage of that. Those previously vetted planning sessions come straight from the website, the West Salem Business District Action Plan. This is what it's supposed to look like, not parking lots. In addition, and this was from 2015-17, and I'll go a little further back than what I've heard people talk about tonight, and that's back to 2004, the master plan for the city for West Salem neighborhood. And it gives much more detail than I can talk about in the time that I have with you today. But I just wanted to encourage you and implore you to not allow this to continue without stepping back and revisiting the plan that Northwest Human Services has that would be in compliance with what the master plan is for the community. On all three adjustment requests, they fail to satisfy what is required to have those approved. Adjustment request number 1 talks about it being in a residential zone. Proposed development will not detract from the livability or appearance of the residential area. This is a residential area and it's meant to be live work. Adjustment number 2, the request for they don't meet, it's not equally or better met by the proposed development. And again, what they're doing does detract from the livability or appearance of the residential area. And also it states that if more than one adjustment has been requested, the cumulative effect of all the adjustments result in a project which is still consistent with the overall purpose of the zone, ESMU, which you can look in further detail in those documents I just shared with you. And lastly, adjustment number 3, again, not detracting from the livability or appearance of the residential area. And I'm quite offended that the applicant's response is the proposed development will not detract from the livability or appearance of the area. That's just not true. A parking lot, as has been stated by several people, it does not enhance property value nor appearance. And it also limits the use of this property. It's mixed use, not single use, which is what a parking lot is. Some comments from those documents, just to refresh you, is that it promotes a main street area that will build upon existing, not tear down, development, opportunities for reuse, neighborhood-oriented uses, encourage active storefronts and live-work uses, preserve historical assets. Specifically in the West Salem master plan, that the historical areas would have their unique character preserved, diversity, improved livability, high quality of life, the heritage of the community. This is not the development that Northwest Human Services is proposing, has not taken any consideration for the neighborhood around it. And from what the comments are tonight that I've heard, they aren't even considering the global environment or they would have added the charging cars. That's not a new concept, and Salem Electric offers quite an incentive right now to put those in and your residents. And so
Ms. Witters, I'll need to have you wrap up maybe your final comments.
Thank
to be on your time.
Yeah, well, with the time that I have left, thank you. I don't have a flashing light or anything, so I appreciate that. With the time that I have left, I am concerned about the environment and their lack of consideration for it. And I'll share with you this video from a rainstorm that the mention was made of the sewer rainwater runoff. There's a drain right at the bottom between this, where the cone is. And I don't know if you can see through my kitchen window here, this puddle in the backdrop. It's not running off. So when you have parking there and cars that are dripping oil, where is that runoff going to go? It's going to go into my yard or pollute the system. I just really encourage you to not approve this until further consideration has been made for the environment, both with the neighbors and globally. Thank you.
Do we have questions of Ms. Witters from the commissioners? I'm giving them a few more minutes to raise their hand. And I am not seeing any. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you, Ms. Whittier. I really appreciate your presentation. I thought it was helpful and really add some facts to the records that we may not have had, especially newer commissioners. The one question that I have for you, it seems like our choice really is between a surface parking lot or on-street parking, which many of the neighborhoods have a long history of objecting to. How do you reconcile that question of losing potentially, the space which could have a better use in that neighborhood than the proposed use versus on-street parking?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Slater. My thoughts about that, and this goes back to the comments that were made that present this as some solution for the neighborhood, misrepresent what the original intent was and the concerns were for parking. It wasn't solely or exclusively or even at all to build a parking lot and take cars off the street into a parking lot. It was to preserve the neighborhood. And that's what the concern was with parking. And by the plan that's being put there, it's not only disrupting the master plan, which is supposed to create a buffer between commercial and residential, it's just expanding their reach and encroachment into the neighborhood. So it was never, you're asking about a proposal or a solution for parking. If anything, I would say take it to Edgewater where it's actually zoned commercial. But it seems that the path of least resistance has been to buy up properties and tear them down because that's easier, but that's not always best. And it's certainly not in the interest of the neighborhood. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, it does.
Additional questions of Ms. Witters? Thank you for your time and your presentation.
Thank you all.
Welcome. Would the applicant like to come up or speak and rebut any comments that were made? You have 5 minutes if you wish. Either Paul or Sam.
Yes, this is Sam Thomas again. The only comments I have is, as was discussed in the staff report, this is an allowed use in the zone. It's a supportive use for the main campus. This has been it's been in design in over multiple years. Multiple disciplines have looked at things like safety, the environment, and what's going to create a functional building for this space. The parking requirement is part of the code. So in order to provide a building that the Northwest Human Services will really be able to utilize, that does come with parking, so that has to go somewhere. This is, Paul can speak more to kind of the strategy, but the design has been in process for several years, and now it's finally, this is kind of the final phase to create that final master plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if I might add to that, this is Paul again.
Yes.
I've been with the clinic 25 years as we've sort of grown and expanded in this location as demand for services has gone up. And probably the most constant thing I've heard from our neighbors is please don't park in front of our houses. And I wish I could gather up and show you all the emails we've written to staff to redirect them where to park and trying to move people around and keep them away from the neighborhood. So this has been our best solution, if you will, over time to how do you have staff to take care of this many patients and still at the same time give the guests and our patients access to the building and keep our staff and their vehicles as far out of their way as well as the neighbor's way. So as Sam mentioned, we've been working on this several years, and this is a culmination of that work.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? Final questions of the applicant from commissioners? Commissioner Schweikart.
Thank you very much. I just was wondering, and I don't know if I missed this in the applicant's portion of the staff report, but how long has the lots that are part of this development proposal been under the ownership of Northwest Human Services?
Paul, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was just sitting here talking to Ryan Johnson, and we were looking back because we bought the properties at different times. So we're estimating it's been 8 or 9 years.
Okay.
Did you have a follow-up question, Commissioner Schweikart?
Yeah, no, I think, and so over the last 8 to 9 years, the what was in existence on that site has been utilized as office space, and then that office space is now being accommodated in the redesigned location that was part of phase 1 of this development. Is that correct?
Well, yes, in terms of we're bringing it across the street onto the main campus. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're good. Okay. Any other questions of the applicant? Final opportunity. Seeing none, I think that's great. Final opportunity for questions of staff. Do we have any more questions of Aaron or Lisa? And I am not seeing anything. So if not, I just want to make sure I don't cut anybody off. I will go ahead and close the hearing. Commissioner McKinley, do you have a motion?
I do. Madam President, I move that we adopt the report for public hearing 5.1.
And do I have a second?
Second.
I'll second. Yeah.
Commissioner Levin is our second. Okay, discussion on the motion. And Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. I'm sorry for taking up so much time at this meeting. This is a little bit complicated for me because I certainly am not excited at the idea of creating a surface parking lot. And I think Ms. Whittier's points were persuasive. On the other hand, this is a decision that clearly was made well before I joined the commission, and it would be kind of perverse to vote against this at this point. It seems like the parking lot and some of the variances that they've requested around the parking lot flow directly from the initial decision a year or so ago. And it's just, I just point this out because it's a little bit of an unusual situation. I probably just abstain from this vote. But I guess it raises a point because it doesn't seem like there's much for me to vote on, that the decision had been made in the past, and I want to respect that. I think it's probably good that we have a clinic there, and I don't think we don't want to drive the clinic out of the neighborhood. But on the other hand, I just find it a little bit complicated.
Thank you. Commissioner Heller.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just got to echo Commissioner Slater's comment. See, I don't even know where we're coming from because I don't have the information from the past decisions. So I too would have to abstain. That's all.
Okay, question of Lisa Anderson Ogilvie. I know in the legislature you cannot abstain, you have to say aye or no, you have to be there. I've never heard that brought up before.
You can, Natasha, yeah, they can abstain, right, Natasha?
No, they cannot abstain unless there's a conflict of interest. So unless you have a conflict of interest or bias that you cannot overcome, then you are not allowed to abstain in a land use proceeding. So you need to vote. Sorry.
I thought that was
not very nice.
They don't even have.
Yeah. Sometimes the rules aren't very nice. So,
Can I ask a
if you
clarifying
have
question?
questions, or if I guess based on what Commissioner Heller just said, if there is information that you believe you do not have and is necessary to allow you to make a decision, you may need to move back into the hearing and ask for that information because you are as commissioners not allowed to abstain. For that on that basis, anyway.
Thank you. Commissioner Kopcho, followed by Commissioner Pollock.
Well, I wanted to follow up on that question from Natasha before she disappeared. But
I'm still here.
Hey, welcome back. Are people allowed to vote present?
I don't think that fits within the land use. No, I think you need to vote either up or down.
Okay, I'm just trying to hand them a get out of.
And I appreciate that. But I can look up real quick and see if I can find something, but that's not my recollection of the case law regarding votes.
Sure, no, I appreciate that. I do actually have a different comment, not related to that.
Okay, go for it.
So the one thing I just want to say is I was present, fortunately, a year ago, which seems like 10 years ago, thanks to how 2020 has gone so far. but this comes down to me, it just reminds me how frankly irritated I get anytime we have a case that demonstrates how when we restrict the availability of the supply of land by the creation and enforcement of artificial standards like minimum parking and setbacks, among other things, unless they're necessary for utility, how it has the ripple effect throughout the city that we see. Among other things, that ripple effect, those reductions in supply, inflate the cost of the remaining available land. And that's something that we struggle with, because then we start talking about, well, we need affordable housing, this, that, and the other thing. So cases like this, where it's just, we have this surface lot that we come in, it's just something that I have to put out there, because it's a constant reminder of how we seem to be fighting a battle with ourselves in the long run. And I don't know if we're winning or losing. So that's all I'll say about that. So.
Okay, Commissioner Pollack, followed by Commissioner Levin.
If we open up the hearing again, I would suggest that we go all the way back to when the garage on Northwest Human Services put that garage there, because I appreciate Cheryl Witter's participation in this. She has been an active voice for the neighborhood since the Northwest Human Services were putting in the garage. In fact, when I was doing the walking of the neighborhood, she was one of the first houses I spoke to as a land use chair. And then later as a commissioner, when the two houses were going to be purchased and revised and then used for parking and things such as that, she also testified that these are I will say that I'm hearing echoes of previous statements that she's made. So if we do open it up, I would like to say that what we're hearing now is not a lot different than what we heard in the past. And I believe some of the issues of the mixed use that she was were brought up when we first made these conditions. So if we do open it up, I would say, Jay, not only the last one, but all the way to the garage issue, so we could hear all the testimony she's talking about for those areas. So that's all. That's what I wanted to say.
Commissioner Levin.
Thank you. I'll try to keep my comments brief, but I'm in support of the motion, and with that being said, though, I still understand and respect the conflict that always happens to anyone, whether it's commercial property or residential property, when you're next to redevelopment, and that's always going to be a friction point, no matter what. And I think that that's a big issue here, is that this new mixed use zone creates basically a different buffer to the neighborhood than what used to be there, which was more Second Street itself. And so now the neighborhood is taking a little bit different shape because of that. And that's kind of what we're seeing take place here. And as noted a couple of times, this is not a conditional use or a special use. This is an outright allowed use in the zone. Something that I think is not being addressed and might quell some of the neighborhood concerns is the landscaping plan. And no, it's not required for this land use action. And no, it would not be normal for us to see one here, but it might help to give a visual picture to the neighborhood so that neighbors understand maybe that they're going to have a beautiful tree canopy lining their fence in the future, and not a vacant yard with an old house. So that might help a little bit while not being required. So maybe some advice to the applicant as far as mitigating some of those neighborhood concerns. But in general, there's, when you look at the property, the clinic currently sits on, the fact that this, I don't know if we really need to reopen the hearing because it was noted that this is a result of an allowance that was originally given, knowing that they were going to have to come up with that parking at a later date. And that's all this is. And to say, well, this little property is all parking and no building with parking is somehow different than a big building with parking next door, I would argue and say, no, it's the same thing. It's just the scale at which you're looking at it. And it's really important to kind of zoom back out again and look at the neighborhood and understand where that mixed use zoning runs along 2nd Street. So for those reasons, I support this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. I concur with your comments. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. I found Commissioner Levin's comments helpful as well. It doesn't seem worthwhile to reopen the hearing or go back to the very beginning. I think if I am required to vote, I will vote yes for this.
Thank you, Commissioner Slater. Any additional comments as we're under discussion of the motion? I am not seeing anybody's hand raised. Zachary, would you please call the roll for confirmation of the motion, signify by saying aye or nay?
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
What?
Commissioner Heller, you are muted.
Sorry. Aye.
Commissioner Capcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinley?
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Thank you, Zachary. Motion passed. Moving on to item 6, special orders of business. 6.1, the tree work session follow-up. Lisa?
I just thought you were going to talk amongst yourselves. So. No. Yeah, I think we canceled our last 2 meetings, right? So it's been a while since we have talked about this. Hopefully you all did your homework. It's not very often that there's homework besides the lengthy reports we send to you. So I think we had talked about all of you watching the City Council work session on the street tree program, and then us having a discussion about next steps. Originally, Commissioner Slater had suggested the Planning Commission have a work session on the street tree chapter, and I think the tree chapter that governs trees on private property. So I think we decided to start with making sure everyone had kind of the base knowledge about what was discussed at council and heard the conversation about potential changes to the street tree chapter, how that could work with land use, how those appeals could potentially come to the Planning Commission. So hopefully you all did that. And I don't know if you have thoughts, if you want to have a work session, if you want to wait until the early new year and we can check in with Public Works and see where they're at, if they're going to be crafting some code amendments, and then maybe come back with potential code amendments, or if you want to have a conversation first. Happy to do whatever you want.
So City Council hasn't decided yet to land us with the decisions, or if there's a conflict on the fining, any of those things yet, right?
No, I think they gave what I felt was pretty strong direction that somebody, if they're going through the land use process and it involves removal of a street tree, that permit should be combined with their land use application. So that way, if somebody's appealing that land use application, the appeal of the street tree removal goes with that. And obviously, you know, a lot of appeals come to Planning Commission, although some go to the hearings officer and some go to the City Council, depending on the application type. So I think they gave that pretty clear direction. Whether they wanted to change the entire kind of permit process and take it away from the Parks Board and have the appeals of all tree removals come to Planning Commission, I'm not sure was as clear. But they did discuss that from what I recall.
Because I think we'll be interested, and all of us can to chime in today and discuss what we want to discuss about that. But I'm hoping that we would have a look at those code amendments that you're going to propose, especially if they have, well, I'd like to see all of them, but especially if they're going to impact our work as a commission. But
yes, absolutely.
So comments, Commissioner Slater, what did you think about that work session?
I'm still thinking about parking minimum. So
okay, well, you can keep about that then.
I thought it was extremely helpful. I thought it was very deliberative. There was a lot of good information out there, and I think the council has teed up some possible improvements for our street tree system, and I think that's good.
Good, Commissioner Schweikart.
Sorry, I actually just raised my hand about the timing for the code update.
Well, what would you like to say?
Oh, you want to know the timing, you mean?
Yeah, when did the drafted code update?
Well, we're not the lead on it. It's Public Works, so I haven't heard anything. In that work session, I heard them say early next year. I think that was in October, so I would take early to mean maybe February. So I will check in on them. I know, we're working on our own code amendments, and people every 2 weeks, where you at with that code amendment? And 10 excuses for why we haven't got anywhere. So hopefully they're doing better than we're doing at the moment. So I will check in with them. I haven't seen any drafts. I don't think they're that far along. And I know that they'll share those drafts. And obviously I can tell them that once they have a draft, if you all want to have a work session on the draft or have a presentation of the draft language,
that'd be great.
We can do that as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Commissioner Slater, and followed by Commissioner Pollack.
Thank you. I was just going to add that it would probably be helpful to the council if the commission expressed an opinion on whether or not we want to have the tree removal permits bundled in with land use application. I don't know if Lisa agrees with that or not, but I don't think that.
I'm nodding, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so I think you could do that formally when there's an amendment before them. That would be great with a letter, assuming you all agree. If you don't agree, it'd be good, I guess, to say now so I can tell Public Works we might have an issue. But I feel like last time when I gave a summary of the work session, there was seemed like general agreement on that.
I think it makes sense to do that unless I hear somebody screaming on the screen. Commissioner Pollack.
When I read on Commissioner Slater's background before, when he was a candidate for the Planning Commission, I knew he was going to be our tree guy. he had quite extensive involvement in different organizations, and I knew. So I'm actually going to pose my question to him: is do you think, as we educate what we brought ourselves to a little bit of the education now, do you think it's worth having a work session before they come up with the amendments or not? Because it's like that's my question to you. Do you think it's worth it, or should we wait until Public Works come up with some basic things and then we build from there? Or do you think it'd be better for us to be really, really more educated in trees before we get to the proposed?
Well, actually, I'll put on my past hat as a lobbyist and not as a tree person, and say that we're always going to have a better ability to influence the outcome in the way we want the earlier we start in the process. So I think the question is, if the commission wants to play a little bit more of a proactive role and work through some of the issues that may have come up over the years related to trees within the land use process, we have a better chance of addressing those issues by starting early and incorporating our feedback into the draft, then wait till there's a draft. I think probably we've all had the experience where someone sits down and puts together a draft, they become fairly locked into those ideas, and it's harder to get some change or incorporate different thinking.
But Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, isn't it correct? I mean, we don't get the specificity on the tree information. It's part of the landscape plan that's submitted a little bit later when the permits are pulled. other than we know that there's a certain percentage of trees and they have to be mature trees and the DBA has to be a certain number, correct? Do we get into the weeds now on that?
Not generally. So generally, like tonight's application, what we're looking for is the square footage that they have, the space that's required in the areas, you know, when you add it up and the setbacks. And then there's a condition that says that your building permit time, you need a full landscape plan, irrigation, and then that's when we check for the plant units. Unless there's maybe a significant tree that they're proposing, you know, to remove, then we would look at it at this point. And then really through land divisions, like a subdivision, that's more where with the application, the trees are reviewed at the same time because, you know, we might have them move a street over or something to save a tree or something like that. But the amendments that we're talking about are just for street trees. So it's a pretty narrow scope of applications that ever even involve removing a street tree. Most of the time it's just about planting new street trees. But sometimes, you know, if they have to do a street widening or a new driveway or something, then they might remove a street tree. And then that's when it comes into play with your application.
Could we nominate Commissioner Slater to be in those meetings with Public Works as they're drafting language?
We could definitely have some meetings with Commissioner Slater and staff. I can set that up and so we can chat. It's a legislative process, so we can do that for sure. I don't know if Public Works will agree, but I'll just say yes on their behalf and then they won't have a choice.
What do you think, Commissioner Slater? Would that be something that you would want to do, take on?
I'd be happy to.
Yay! And then you can come back and tell us about it and make us really super smart. Okay, perfect. Any more discussion on this tree work session follow-up?
I just want to say, I'm sorry, Commissioner Slater, if I put you in a tough position, but I really believed you were going to be our tree guy.
You fulfilled my lifelong ambition. I want to say thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll be looking for everybody else's passion here pretty soon. Moving on to public comment on number 8. I think y'all received that email earlier, the email letter from Noreen Wineland, just to make sure that that's part of our record that you read that. And
on that one, Commissioner Griggs, I did forward it to our neighborhood enhancement division just to see if there was any sort of complaint that they could handle. They do handle abandoned vehicles on the street.
Oh, that's great.
And property maintenance. So I did forward it to them, thinking it was maybe more appropriate to go to them.
Did you let Noreen know that?
I did, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Any questions on that letter? Moving on to the planning administrator's report. Lisa Anderton will go be again.
Okay, not much. We do, if you looked on the fly sheet, we have a case on the 15th. And then we also have our Marine Drive work session that we've been talking about for half a year. It's finally here. So it'll be on December 15th. And we'll have Robert Chandler and Julie Warnicki from Public Works here to present and hopefully answer all your Marine Drive questions. They're the experts on that. Otherwise, in the planning division, we've hired 2 new planners that will start in January. We've had some vacancies for a while, so we're excited about that. Planner 2s, folks with some experience. So hopefully they're great at being trained and working from home and only knowing their coworkers through Zoom. But that's what Zach's been doing. Zach has never been in the office with us and he's doing a great job. Thanks, Zach, for filling in tonight. He staffs the HLC for us and the hearings officer normally. And we let Shelby go to Arizona on vacation. So otherwise, that's all I have.
Okay, Commissioner Pollack has a question for you, I believe.
Yeah, I want to thank you for putting Marine Drive there on the one day of the year that I decided to take off. But now I will be here because obviously the governor's issues canceled my vacation. Do you know that extensive Marine Drive document that I created? I don't want to subvert what Warnicki and Chandler will be presenting to us, but do you think it would be useful for the other commissioners to have it? Because it was probably, it had a lot of different issues. I know you gave it to them to build on that. So should we just forget about my stuff, or?
It's whatever you want. If you want, I can pass it out to the commissioners. I could also check with Robert and Julie and see if they added anything to it, and then send it out, or to see if they have anything else to send out. But I'm happy to provide it to the commissioners.
Just so they could get a perspective on. Well, I don't know if they're going to do a lot of the history that I did. Then I say no, because I mean the commissioners really don't want to be doing all that reading at Christmas. But I just want to make sure that the one thing is Commissioners Levine's roundabout. Make sure that they discuss that. If it's not in there, make sure they talk about that. And I did talk about that with Mr. Chandler. So, but I want to make sure that that's in there.
Speaking of roundabout, I heard that there's going to be a roundabout at the new Costco location.
Oh, cool.
Yes, on
there
27th in the driveway.
That's pretty cool. I think we should have our meeting there. No, I'm just kidding. Any other additions to your report, Lisa?
No.
I'll move on.
So my answer is we won't pass out my stuff.
I will check with Julie and Robert, and if they're going to do an extensive history, I won't pass it out, and if they're not, then I'll pass it out.
Okay.
Sound good? Okay.
No, knowing Robert, we're going to have an extent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good comments for the good of the order. I just found out today Natasha's leaving the city. Yes. Natasha, would you like to make us really sad?
Oh,
no. No, it's all good. I have accepted a position with the Marion County Circuit Court as a referee. And so I'll be, my last day is December 11th. And I'm not sure exactly who will staff Planning Commission. Sorry, my screen is a little wonky right now. I'm not sure exactly who will staff Planning Commission. Most likely it will be Dan Atchison, the city attorney, at least for the interim, when he has time and as there are sticky issues. So we'll kind of be watching, he'll be watching the agenda and consulting with Lisa to know which meetings to come to. So please feel free to reach out to him as you have questions after next Friday. And it has been my pleasure to serve as your staff attorney. I've really enjoyed working and getting to know each of you. And for the new commissioners, I'm sorry I didn't get much of an opportunity to meet you ever in person or much in person. And I know you're in good hands. Lisa is incredibly professional and an excellent planning administrator for the city. So I'll miss all of you and thank you very much.
We'll miss you. And I will, when we were live, I always loved it because you had such a delicate way of leaning over. Might want to do that. And can't do that now. So I'm sure I'm messing up left and right, but you're always such a lovely person to work with. And I had confidence in your advice. So we will miss you. And I will give Dan a really hard time. You can just tell him right now.
Good. I'll let him know that. That will excite him.
Okay. And the other thing I wanted to point out, I'm sure you guys saw the newspaper, our Vice President McKinley made above the fold front section, which is really hard to do. So way to go with the flags, Brian. Commissioner McKinley, would you like to say anything?
I did. I have an update. You know what looks really good in the middle of a roundabout? A city flag. But anyway, so I have this. This is the original, the handmade original city flag. My friend Andrew, his grandfather was the guy who ran the original contest. And so Andrew is the chair of the selection committee at the end in July. So we have over 35 submissions so far. And that's pretty good in the big picture. We have 7 months left. Usually a city flag commission thing gets about 100, 150. So I'm looking at getting the schools involved. So we're on our way. And the mayor in that article did say he's looking forward or something. So
is it a line item in the budget?
No, I am going to supply flags at the first because I have a cheap supplier. So I'm going to supply flags to begin with. Of course, the city and part of their budget, of course, would buy whatever flags in the future. But I'm going to supply a flag as part of my project at the cost of my nonprofits, my civic camp nonprofit. So no cost to the city other than the normal, what they would usually pay for a flag in whatever.
Well, my
they would
hat's
do.
off to you, Brian, because when you brought this up probably 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, seems like 10, but
Yeah.
you know, I kind of went, uh-huh. But you have
Mhm.
persevered, and you know, all credit to you on that.
Yeah, so we'll give it to council August and we'll see what they want to do with it, if anything. So yeah, thank you all for your support on this. By the way, also, I know it's a fringe item. It's not a tree and it's not a roundabout or a much needed roadway or bridge, but still thank you all for, you know, allowing me to go forward with this. So thank you.
You're welcome, Brian. Other comments for the good of the order from anybody? I better go back to my participant screen and not seeing any. We will adjourn the meeting and we'll see you on the 15th. Meeting's over. Bye.